This is the Pepperwood Podcast, a production of Pepperwood, a non-profit conservation organization based at a 3,200-acre nature reserve near Santa Rosa, California, in the heart of the traditional homeland of the Wapo people. At Pepperwood, we aim to inspire conservation through science. And on this show, we talk to scientists, stewards, and environmental educators about what they do and how they do it. We hope to give you a glimpse into the real experiences of folks who devote their lives to taking care of local ecosystems and sharing them with others. Welcome back to the Pepperwood Podcast. In our last episode, we got to know Ryan Ferrell as a scientist and a conservation professional. Today, we're going to learn about his experiences as a hunter. This conversation is not so much about hunting at Pepperwood. That's not a publicly available option that we're inviting folks to experience at Pepperwood. Hunting activity at Pepperwood is limited, and it's carried out by specific staff members, like Ryan, and members of the Native Advisory Council that have a historical relationship with this land. Ryan will share some information about the small amount of hunting that takes place at the reserve, but more to the point, he will describe his philosophy and his practice of hunting, how it relates to conservation, and how hunting is managed on a statewide level. Speaking of the state, in this conversation, Ryan and I fall into the habit of using an acronym again and again, CDFW. And that acronym refers to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. That's the state agency that manages California's natural resources, following a public mandate which includes distribution of hunting and fishing licenses, for sure, but also large-scale restoration projects and an immense amount of ecological research. CDFW employs a small army of scientists, some of whom we have partnered with at Pepperwood. For instance, we recently provided access and support for CDFW scientists to collar 2 black bears to monitor their movements. CDFW also funds research at organizations like Pepperwood. For instance, Pepperwood's forest monitoring plots that we discussed with Michaela Freed on a previous episode of the podcast were established with the support of a CDFW grant. Ryan will discuss how the practice of hunting is closely related to CDFW's quantitative monitoring of large mammal species. And there I just went, saying an acronym over and over again. So, again, that refers to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and much respect to that agency. In fact, I started my career as an environmental educator working for CDFW, teaching elementary school students about the work that they do to support salmon populations. So it is an agency very close to my heart. Let's hear more about them and about hunting in general from Ryan Ferrell, Pepperwood's Sentinel site manager. I started Ryan off with a somewhat cheeky question. Who are hunters? Like, are they people that hate nature and are trying to kill it?
Oh, not at all. I mean, I always, I think like hunting like the true conservationist. And I don't know, in my upbringing, it felt like there may have been more animosity around like, oh, you hunt and you kill things. And like, well, yeah. But then I kind of feel like in the last few decades, and maybe that's just me getting older, that like, and working at Pepperwood, definitely like, conservationists on both sides of the hunting aisle have really come together and be like, and recognizing that like hunters do a whole lot for this, and understanding that what hunters do and what they harvest, if they're lucky enough, it's never a done deal. How much money and effort goes into that, and that money isn't just gone, but you buy tags or licenses, even ammunition. A lot of that money and revenue goes right into supporting conservation, whether that's your national wildlife refuges or your state refuges.
Sure, like CDFW is in a lot of cases who's giving you those tags, and they're funding all the science that they do.
Exactly, and so when this argument comes up, like, oh, you go out there and you shoot so many animals or this and that, like, well, one, no, it's not so many animals, and all of those bag limits are backed up by science coming from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. So I sort of lean on them, when they say, and it sounds pretty crazy, hey, you can harvest up to 30 geese a day. That sounds insane. And I agree, it is, but it's backed up by the science. So we're talking snow geese and your Canadian geese that you might see around here. There are so many snow geese out there, and they're doing so well that they are basically rooting up the Arctic tundra and destroying that ecosystem. And the ecosystem will be okay, but there's this idea of a carrying capacity. Whether hunters take those birds or the natural world does it, there's only so much food and space and water and resources to go around. And so if you have an overpopulated snow goose population, they're all competing for that resources. And then things like natural phenomenon, disease or starvation, you just have weaker animals, and Mother Nature comes and takes those animals regardless. So CDFW has this kind of data and does this kind of science to recognize, like, hey, there are so many snow geese out there right now that, like, we're going to up the limits here, because every snow goose that I am fortunate enough to harvest is maybe one less that, like, dies of starvation out there on the tundra, because there are so many and they deplete the resource.
That's great. So on a day when you catch 30 snow geese, which is a pretty amazing day, you're out there like competing maybe with a lynx or something else, but it's not like a lynx can harvest 30 snow geese either. Like, and between the two of you, maybe.
And I got to pause here. I know those limits are up there like that. You can harvest 30 geese and up to 7 ducks in the state of California every day, and you can't have more than 3 times that amount in your possession, right? So you can't go day after day into the 4th day and just pile up that many birds. I have never in my life, and I've done a lot of duck hunting and a lot of chasing every critter out there, never even come close to shooting 30 geese, and that's strictly, it's 20 light geese or white geese. So that's your snow geese, your Ross, your lesser snow, stuff like that, and then 10 dark geese, which would be your your Canadian geese, but around here they're often non-migratory, and so they're like, hey, they're just kind of not migrating. They're overpopulated. They're sort of ruining their own environment. They're not doing what we expect them to do.
Right.
So
they probably don't have their natural predators either.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's probably a big part of it too, is humans get involved in the natural world, and we tend to we better, for whatever reason, and these aren't hunters, I think there's a bad rap if you go back in history, and it never looks good in history. I mean, when you look in retrospect at a lot of things in life, but you think of like the railroad going in across the United States, and a buffalo stampede, and all these dummies jump out and let's kill how many we can kill and just cut their tongues out and harvest their hides. That's not hunting. That's just like free-for-all shenanigans and terrible. That's not conservationist stuff at all. And so I think that history and legacy is for a while followed hunters. And then, conservationists got in there, said like, hey, this isn't sustainable, this isn't going to work, this is ridiculous, and started to put limits, bag limits, daily limits, how much you can have in possession in there, and methods of take. So you can't just you can't take a cannon, and I'm not joking when I say cannon, you can't put a cannon on the front of your boat and paddle up to a whole raft of ducks and maim all these birds.
Right.
There are very strict methods of take.
Unfortunately, rules like that exist because at least one
market
person
hunting
did
back
it.
in the day.
Right.
Think of the gold rush, and we live right here. We are in the center of the gold rush area around here in San Francisco Bay. So you had miners, and you had all kinds of stuff going on in this area, and a lot of people. And so market hunting was a very profitable business back in the day. You go out on the bay, kill as many ducks as you can, bring them to all these hungry people coming through San Francisco in this area, whether it's logging, fishing, mining, you name it.
Well, that story's kind of reminding me of the story of grazing and kind of how we've reapproached it, right? Where it's like, there's a history of really terrible grazing practices, things that they didn't know were maybe terrible at the time, or maybe didn't look that hard into it. But then that doesn't mean grazing is always a bad thing, right? Like if you use it properly, if you think about it as a tool, or, even without you thinking of it as a tool, even if it's recreational, like you can approach it in a way that's like much more in line with ecological health.
I mean, I don't know when the word sustainability was invented, but I think when you showed up in California, as a European settler, a white person, because I realize people have been here for thousands of years and there's a history long before our short memories of it. But you show up and like, oh my God, look at these hundreds of thousands, millions of birds. No doubt about it, because I've seen them in the Central Valley and like, it's still impressive. But I try to always think back like, man, what did this look like 200 years ago?
Yeah.
You see all this sustainable. You would never think in a million years like, oh, I'll just shoot as much as I want. This will never run out. But that goes on for a while, and then all of a sudden people start to look up and go, uh-oh.
It is having an effect.
What's going on?
Yeah, kind of like dumping things in the ocean. Like, no, actually, there's not an endless supply of space and time.
Yeah, and same with grazing. It's be like, oh, look at these never-ending green fields, and I'm the only one here with cattle. Let them go for it.
Right.
Well, more people show up, you put more cattle on the land, you keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, and pretty soon you go, uh-oh. Why isn't the grass growing like it used to?
Yeah.
And why is this not as profitable? And
it does add up if you think about things as infinite. It's like, well, no, that's almost never true.
No. And then, we need to do this sustainably. Otherwise, we're not going to do it at all.
For sure.
And sometimes it's carrot and stick. Sometimes, you have to have regulations put in from agencies top down. Or if you're just a true conservationist and you care about the land and what you're doing in generations to come, whether it's farming, grazing, ranching of any sort, or hunting, you're invested in it. You don't want to deplete this resource and this opportunity and the thing you love. So
that's great. So to like dive even deeper in, like, who are the kind of people you know as a hunter? Like, who are the kind of people who are like, on your team who go out there and hunt? Like, I know we can't make any generalizations, of course, that's the point. But I'm curious, like, do you notice any patterns with them? All
right, I'm going to start like high level here and zoom into like the hunter I like and like I like to be around and that I help create. So just like any group, there's a wide variety of people who participate in hunting. Some I cringe, like, man, I don't want to be associated with that guy. But for example, like these national wildlife refuges. And I should clarify this. It's a national wildlife refuge. And typically everyone thinks like, it's a wildlife refuge. How can you hunt there? Right?
Good question.
Well, what pays for all of that is the fact that you can hunt there, or whether it's tax dollars or just the revenue that you make from hunters. I mean, you have to put in for a lottery system. This, for example, this may be Delavan, Sacramento, Colusa. There's a whole chain of wildlife refuges running down the Central Valley, and they're kind of like these last holdovers where these migratory birds can hop from one to the next because right now, because most of it is gone into agriculture, and like they don't let the birds hang out in the rice fields or your ag fields and grub it all up and eat it. So it's really nice it's critical to have these refuges. So in these refuges, they're ginormous. Most of that is a closed zone. No one can go in there and hunt or do anything. And a very little part of it is a zone where you can hunt. And so you can perhaps get a duck hunting blind in there and hunt, but you pay an awful lot and then you compete with everybody, and it's not always easy going. And the birds quickly figure out, right, where the closed zone is versus the hunting zone. And there's like an invisible wall. I don't know what movies there are, but you've seen those movies that have that like invisible dome. And I've been there.
Like geese, a force field.
Yeah, exactly. All the birds get up and they start coming your way. And you're like, oh my God, I'm going to get an opportunity here. And they hit this invisible wall, and somehow they go straight up another 50 yards. And you're like, there's no way I can reach him now.
Oh, man.
Okay, so getting back to, I was a tangent there, but who are hunters, right? There's all kinds. There's real goofballs and yahoos out there, and there's people who do or more ethical hunters and not as ethical hunters. But what I try to do, and certainly the other hunters that I associate with, I mean, it's honestly, it's all about the pursuit. It's not about filling the freezer for me. I mean, honestly, I tell my wife when I go deer hunting more often than not, like, all right, I'll do my best to hide from them. Because like the work begins once you harvest an animal.
Oh, sure.
And I approach it honestly, like every time. And it's sort of, I don't know if it tempers your expectations or whatever, but I love being out in nature and in the woods. It's a new adventure every time you go. It's a different time, season, and you don't know what's out there until you go and see it. And that combination of season and time and what you see only exists for that instant, and you've got it all to yourself. And so there's no disappointment in coming home empty-handed. It is always a great day to walk in the woods.
Because you've been out there and you've gotten to experience it. Yeah.
And
it was your excuse, right?
Yeah. And it makes it that much more exciting and sweeter when like you've paid your dues, because for every deer I've harvested or pig I've harvested, how many miles and days and trips, and you could call them unsuccessful, but I wouldn't. They're just time downfield and you're just exploring and seeing cool things. And if it was easy, and I've had easier hunts, in certain places when the ducks are in or something, and you can go out there and shoot your limit of 7 birds, that's cool. But if you do that every time, and some would probably say otherwise, but if that happens every time, it starts to take the fun out of it a little bit. It's just like too easy. It wasn't a challenge.
Right.
I really want to work the birds and like select which birds I want to shoot, and have to make some good shots and really think about how I place my decoys and what's the water doing, the tide doing, the wind doing, where are the other people, do I call too much, too little? So there's so many things that go into hunting, whether it's waterfowl or turkey or now deer hunting. For me, just you're walking through the brush and eventually you look up and you go, oh my God, there's a deer. And you don't ever want to be in a rush to harvest an animal. And that's one of the lessons that's taken me the longest to learn. And it's so tempting, your adrenaline's going and like, oh, here comes the duck. It's out there. People would debate this. It's out there like 50 plus yards. Like I'm not going to pull up and try to hit that bird at 50 yards, because by the second shot, it's going to be at 60 yards. And the effective range of my gun, and effective doesn't just mean the ability of your gun, but your own ability to make that shot.
Which you got to get to know from yourself.
Yeah,
right?
You got to practice. A lot of money and a lot of rounds downfield. I mean, you have to know your gun and yourself and your ability to make that shot. And that's an ethical decision that you have to make in the split second, because yes, I've killed birds that far away, but more often than not, I miss. And between hitting them and missing them outright is you wound birds at that range. And so, I've seen plenty of other hunters at the refuges who put the biggest shells they can in their gun, and they're pulling up on geese at like 60 plus yards. You maim birds like that. And then you see it. You see the birds just sailing off into the horizon, crippled to starve and die. And they're lucky if they just get eaten by a coyote pretty soon, which is neat because nothing goes to waste in nature, okay? And so, that's something, is solace the right word? Something that I appreciate is like, when you gut out an animal and you skin it or whatever, you go, God, that's an awful big pile of what looks like waste right there that I'm not using. I'm not tanning the hide or eating the brains or the tongue. You're kind of quartering out the animal a lot of times and taking that, and that's what most folks do. But nothing goes to waste in nature. I mean, that is a feast for all those coyotes out there, and raccoons and skunks and bears and possums, every little critter. And I've seen it firsthand. I mean, I see it happen, but I'll harvest a pig out here at Pepperwood, and I might shoot early in the day and like get it taken care of and like get back to work, and I'll be downfield and I'll hear the ravens screaming and running around like, oh, those guys are busy. And I see them streaking through the trees, chasing each other, holding gobs of fat because they found the carcass already, and they're just having a feast. And so that's kind of neat to see.
Yeah, that's not the same as, the waste from your pot roast that ends up in the, landfill, even in the compost,
Yeah, nothing goes to waste, and it goes quickly. A lot of critters come out at night, and I've gone back to piles like, oh, where'd all that go? It disappeared in 48 hours.
Fast.
So there was a reference made to hunting at Pepperwood. Again, a very limited practice carried out by a small number of people who have previously established relationships with Pepperwood. As one of those people, Ryan can provide a little insight into that activity, specifically, which species are hunted at the reserve and what kind of impacts does it have?
And I should mention about what we hunt around here. It's just pigs and turkeys, and those are thought to be invasive non-native species around here. And in some places, especially in like all the neighboring properties that are vineyards, pigs are a big problem. They get in there and they root up the crops and they're destroying stuff. So it's a serious problem there.
Even in a wildland space, I mean, the rooting that pigs do, right? That's not necessarily something that this landscape evolved with.
No, it certainly didn't. But that said, when we think of these pigs as invasive or a nuisance and we have to get rid of them, I look at Pepperwood and the hillsides. And pigs can do a lot of disturbance. We could call it damage, but I'll just call it disturbance.
That's
overnight. They'll find an area that's got a lot of grubs or something, or acorns, and in 3 days they'll root up acres, and it doesn't look good. But Pepperwood, California, the natural world is so resilient. Like, you get an average to decent rain year after that, and you come back in a year's time, or even, let's say this rooting happened in the fall before you had a big flush out of new growth with the spring, you won't even know it's there. It just disappears. And so, some disturbance is fine. So we chase the pigs and shoot the pigs, but I don't really think they're doing all that much damage up here at Pepperwood. If they get into our native grasslands, that's something that we actively work to restore and steward, is promoting our native grasses, and whether we're planting them or just providing the right conditions. Now, we certainly don't want the pigs getting in our new plantings and like ripping all that up. That's disappointing.
Sure.
But I don't think that happens as much as we think it does. And I don't know if that'd be really neat, but I don't know if there's data out there that says, pigs rooting around has destroyed our native grasslands.
Compared to human development, I doubt it.
Yeah, compared to human development or the fire suppression over the hundreds of years, where all our natives adopted to having a pretty frequent fire regime here, and then we said, no more fire, and so invasive annuals could get in the introduction of all those invasive annuals. It's always a little disappointing. I start telling people about that's our state grass, this is our native grass, something like that. And then somehow it'll come up and it go, 95% of what you're looking at is non-native invasive grass. Like, that's just the nature of California. So, I don't really know up here if the pigs are hurting anything, but they let me harvest them, so I won't argue with them. And then on to the turkeys. I can never quite get the story of the turkey straight. I think they are native to the U.S., but they may have been more of an eastern species, and like a lot of things, they were sort of introduced over here as a game animal. And
right, when you look at their range, they kind of have this big gap through the Rockies, which makes sense. I can't really see them persisting, but did they jump that, or did we help them jump that?
We probably helped them, just like we helped the pigs come up here.
Sure.
And what damage are turkeys doing up here? I don't really see it, but I'm not going to argue. They taste awful good, and they're fun to hunt. So. And they're doing great. I mean, these turkeys and pigs are doing so well in the state of California. New legislation just passed. It passed a while ago, but was enacted this last July, so just last month. You used to have to buy a tag for every pig you shot, like $22. Now you buy one permit at the beginning of the season for $28. You choose as many pigs as you want for an entire year, and that's California. Good on them for recognizing, okay, we have way too many pigs. This is a problem. We need to make this easier for hunters.
Nudging that happening.
Cool.
But at the same time, it sounds like the small bit of hunting that's happening here at Pepperwood, it's not an invasive management protocol. It's not part of our plan for stewardship.
No, not exactly.
No. So it's it's just like a small form of recreation, kind of like the way that our stewards are allowed the privilege of hiking. For people who are kind of partnered with you, it's it's a little recreational opportunity that's neither necessarily a part of stewarding the property, or even it's certainly not making any damage to the ecosystem either.
Yeah, I mean, it's right there in the gray area. Some years there are quite a few packs of pigs up here, and it's if someone goes out there and harvests a couple, they move on. And so it's hard to say if it's this balance of the right amount of hunting pressure, not even harvesting animals, but if you get into the pack of pigs, there's people running around, they move on. And so in those years, if no one came out, it's hard to say this could turn into 10, 15 acres, entire drainages. Oh, and here's one. Certainly our grassland transects. I've seen pig damage in there, and that's not ideal, right?
Nope.
We're trying to monitor how our native grasses are doing and this and that. And now the pigs, yes, they are a natural part of it, but we don't really want them in there destroying especially our excluded transects where we keep the cattle out. And we want to know what happens given grazing versus not grazing, and then the pigs go under the wire and root up our control. So, it is a management tool for the pigs around here.
Okay. So it
Maybe
might
not huge.
It
but
might facilitate some behavioral change
Yes,
that
yeah.
might be kind of nice for, especially for like research, right? We don't want animals. Well, we don't want hunters or animals in there like damaging all of our Sentinel site equipment.
Yeah.
or our transects, right? So
Yeah.
it's maybe a nice. There's a management consideration there. I found it interesting to hear more about what little hunting takes place at Pepperwood itself. Now let's zoom out to hear more about general hunting ethics and the impact of hunting on conservation on a statewide level.
something I like about hunting in general from an ethical standpoint. If you eat meat or omnivore or whatever, well, just think for a second, compare this chicken breast that you've got on your plate that you picked up at the local grocery store, okay? Well, it doesn't take that much of an imagination to think about the life of that chicken. That chicken lived shoulder to shoulder in a dark house, stomping in its own poo and getting pecked on by all its other chickens, and was essentially force-fed to get as fat as possible, as quick as possible. And then life ended when some underpaid worker probably went in there and just gathered them all up by the neck, wring their necks, and throw them in the basket. Now, when I harvest a turkey in the woods, that turkey has known nothing but the best turkey life and freedom. And even the last possible millisecond of his life, he has no sense of fear, no idea. Matter of fact, he's probably at his prime, and he is super excited because he thinks he's about to meet a lady turkey, and he is fired up. That is the last thought going through his mind, is like, man, I'm about to culminate right here where evolution has brought me. And then it's lights out.
Yeah, not a bad way to go. Yeah.
And, I think, this is almost cliche at this point, but people are so disconnected from where their food comes from. There's probably like this underlying primal thing, like, ew, blood and guts. Like, I don't want to put my hands in the animal and be like, it's like, this is how people did it, and someone's doing it for you. And like, people get over that feeling in a hurry if you take up hunting, but like, it just seems, and I'm not faulting anyone. I eat plenty of beef and chicken from the store, more than I, harvest from the land here. But, don't you turn your nose up. That one gets me. Don't you turn your nose up when you see me cleaning an animal or whatever, because someone else is doing this for you.
Yeah.
And from an animal that you don't know how it lived its life. So you look at me cleaning that animal, and then you get in there and do it. And I know you'll be squeamish the first few times you've cleaned an animal, but like, hey, it wasn't that long ago. A handful of generations. A lot of people grew up on venison or whatever, or had a flock of chickens or not long ago, and you went out there and you participated. And you can argue, nothing goes nicely in the natural world. A deer doesn't just get old and its family's around. It's like, all
Sitting,
right, good night, Grandpa Deer.
Hoof. Yeah,
no,
totally.
Nothing dies of old age. And it's the natural world could be a very brutal place. The deer gets old, or it gets injured. Mm-hmm. It gets weak. It either starves to death slowly or freezes to death, or because it can't keep up or outrun the predator, it gets ripped apart by a pack of coyotes.
Right.
So nothing really goes out nicely in nature. Anyways, I juxtapose it. Sometimes it seems so brutal for people, like, oh, you could kill an animal, but they're so cute, or this or that. And like, yeah, but if you zoom out here, like, this is a pretty easy way to go for an animal. Mm-hmm. And back to that, talking about ethical shots and knowing your limitations with your rifle. Like, you do your very best to make a good shot, but sometimes wounding, particularly ducks or birds, happens. It's part of the game. So you never feel good about that, but you do your best to follow up quickly and dispatch that animal.
How do you expect hunting to impact conservation and the kind of work we do here?
Well, conservation in general, like, I'm thinking large scale here, so I'm thinking migratory pathways. So back to the ducks and the geese, waterfowl. The Pacific Flyway is one of the world-renowned flyways and one of the largest ones. There's the Mississippi Flyway, which may or may not be the same as Central Flyways. There's flyways on the East Coast, and certainly there's the Pacific Flyway from Canada all the way down into Mexico. And I don't know, and I'm going to guess here, I doubt, without hunting and the revenue and money that comes from that, I doubt there would be those chain of both national and state wildlife refuges going all the way from Northern California up in the Klamath area, all the way through to the Salton Sea, these protected areas that, yes, have some areas open to hunting, but mostly they're a closed zone is the word, for these resting stops for these migratory birds. I often say, like, the hunter and the duck can coexist. The duck and the parking lot cannot. So at least they have a chance with hunters out there. But if you go to the edge of the San Francisco Bay and decide to make it a ferry terminal and put a bunch of houses on it, well, the ducks can't live in the ferry building. Right. They could certainly live in the marsh with the hunter. So, yeah, I honestly think without hunters and the revenue there, like, I don't think the Pacific Flyway would be in very good shape, or even some of these other flyways. And I think it was hunters who recognized too, certainly some of them in those early transitional years, recognized that, like, hey, this is headed in a bad way. And we're some of the first to say we need to put some legislation and rules and bag limits and seasons behind all of this. Otherwise, it's going to go away.
What makes sustainable hunting a possibility? And I am immediately wondering if we want to go back to the regulations and the take limits that you've already discussed. Is that a component of that?
Yeah, certainly. And I haven't done the research myself or gathered the data myself, but, we work enough with CDFW. It's a huge organization that has a lot of scientists, biologists, and people on the land that I believe are doing their very best to come up with rules and regulations and limits and seasons that make sense, that will, sustain the population of whatever it is, waterfowl or deer or bears or anything.
Right. You're a data crunching guy, but you can't crunch everybody's data, right?
No.
That's an important part is at your basis, you're trusting that the people who are taking care of that, taking that data and then crunching it are, coming up with good policies.
Yeah. And there's a really interesting feedback loop in all of this, in that a lot of that data they get on populations comes from hunters. You report what you harvest. Right. You come back through a check station. They take all the data on your ducks. They may take a blood sample. They may take a wing to test for avian flu or West Nile virus, the different things, and see how that's spreading. And a lot of that data that Department of Fish and Game or CDFW uses comes from harvested animals and hunters' reports. Right. Otherwise, it's kind of like aerial surveys, and you go, oh, there's a flock. I'm going to go, that's 10,000 here and 5,000 there, which certainly is a big part of it too. But
talk about just like financial sustainability for CDFW. Like, could they hypothetically replace that data, another way, rather than having hunters pay CDFW to go out and do the taking and then give them their data, right? Mm-hmm. Could they really hire another cadre of scientists to go out there and do the data collection themselves? That seems like a big challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are far more hunters in far more places than there are CDFW staff to go count every duck they can find or every deer. And so there's I think, there's a huge science even in the economics of it all too, like what they charge for tags. And they know, hey, if we charge this much for tags, well, then this many people are actually going to buy tags at that price point. It's simple economics. And then they also know, we may issue 10,000 tags for B-zone deer season, but we know that the return rate historically, or successful tags, is about 60%. So they know their quotas. So they sell as many tags as they can, and then they'll either... they know, hey, if we sell 10,000 tags, that'll probably mean that 6,000 deer are harvested in B-zone. And they already have, they know that that's their target mark. So they'll sell that many tags. And so they get all that revenue to keep the science going, keep the mission going, and protect, conserve and protect wildlands and the population of these different game species. Yeah, I'd be interested to know. I mean, I just have this understanding without knowing the actual numbers, the budget of CDFW or California Department of Fish and Wildlife. How much of y'all's budget is backed by hunters? And Yeah,
It's a great question. Well, maybe someday we'll get a CDFW guy who knows that
I'm
budget
sure.
on the
I'm
podcast.
sure. I've probably already met him. Like we probably already work with him. I just have to get him downfield hunting with me, and I can ask him.
There you go. There you go. Thank you so much, Ryan, for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedule from field work to your own data analysis. And really appreciate everything you've offered.
Cool. Well, thanks for this opportunity. I like talking about this stuff. So this was cool. A great Friday afternoon activity.
Love it. Love it. Much gratitude to Ryan for spending these 2 episodes with us and sharing both professional and personal experiences. But don't switch off yet. It's time for this episode's installment of The Nature Sound Guess Who game. Each episode, we play a nature sound for you and challenge you to guess which critter made the sound. If you email your guess to podcast@pepperwoodpreserve.org, you may become podcast famous with a shout out on the next episode when the answer is revealed. Today we have our first pair of Nature Sound Guess Who game winners, longtime listeners Bruce and Leslie, who correctly guessed the identity of the episode 8 Nature Sound. Congratulations, Bruce and Leslie. Now, let's reveal what those listeners so cleverly deduced. Last episode, I promised you a bird, a pretty commonly encountered bird, making its most characteristic vocalization. Let's listen back to that sound now. And that sound was made by the California scrub jay. That's right, the California scrub jay, scientifically known as Aphelocoma californica. Even if you didn't guess the name, I hope you recognize the dulcet tone of their call, which Kaufman's Field Guide to Birds of North America summarizes as shreep. That's with 2 S's, 2 R's, and 2 E's. Shreep. Pretty good approximation. How do you think it compares? The California scrub jay is one of the 3 most common species at Pepperwood in the bird that is blue category. Bird that is blue is our way of referring to these species without conflating them all with the species name bluebird. Kaufman's guide includes them in the group bluish jays without crests, because unlike some other blue jay species, they have sleek, smooth heads. The Audubon Society's field guide tells us that despite their reputation as nest robbers who forage for the eggs of other birds, scrub jays much more commonly feed on insects and acorns. In fact, their tendency to bury acorns for later and leave a few in the ground to sprout may have a profound impact on the regeneration of oak forests following disturbance, and on the distribution of oak trees in general. Jays have been described as uphill planters, as their practice of moving acorns around can counterbalance the tendency of acorns to bounce downhill. So thanks, California scrub jays, and thanks to Bob Hassenick for recording that call out on Sonoma Mountain Road and submitting it to Cornell Lab Macaulay Library, who granted us permission to share it with you. Now, here comes a new sound for you to guess out before next episode. Here it comes in 3, 2, 1. Second chance to listen in 3, 2, 1. There's another curious challenge to think about, and submit your answers to us at our Facebook or Instagram posts, or email it to us at podcast@pepperwoodpreserve.org. Thank you to all of my fellow Pepperwood staff members for supporting this podcast project, including Stephanie Antonoro, our communications coordinator, Haley Stiskell, our outreach and event specialist, who manages the social media posts. And thanks to you for listening. Until next time, don't forget to keep your ears tuned in to nature. The California scrub jay is one of 3 species at Pepperwood in the bird that is blue category. Bird that is blue is our way of referring to these species without conflating them all with the species name bluebird. Kaufman's guide includes them in the group bluish jays without crests, because unlike some other blue jay species, they have sleek, smooth heads.